Stunning testimony in the United States this week by a former Facebook employee suggests the social media giant knowingly operates platforms that harm children and allows misinformation to divide society. Here in Canada, the Trudeau government says it is going to introduce legislation to combat online hate speech within its first 100 days of power. Fareed Khan is the founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Fareed, good afternoon to you. I feel like we've heard for a great many years, haven't we, that governments want to do something about the harm that social media can cause. Do you believe that things may change and that their governments will, in fact, do something?
Well, thank you for having me on. Good afternoon. And I'm hoping that the government is going to take real and meaningful action, but we've seen the government talk about this before, and yet we haven't seen the sort of action that is required to rein in the social media giants, which have an enormous amount of power over what people read, what people see, and how people think. And I think that this revelations that have come out is like putting the smoking gun in the hand of the perpetrator. And I believe that governments now have no choice but to take action.
Well, and I guess I wonder how surprised you were by the information that people, it's been all over headlines and 60 Minutes and everything. The U.S. Facebook whistleblower testifying to Congress this week, Frances Haugen, what she said wasn't all that new to you, was it? Tell me more, why?
No, it's not new news. It's information that's been out in the public realm for some time. There's been a considerable amount of academic research that has been done that demonstrates the harms of social media and how manipulative social media platforms are. We saw the best example of the weaponization of social media during the Donald Trump presidency, where he used Twitter to target particular groups. And those who were his followers and those who followed what he said and what he tweeted took that as gospel and then went out and acted on that. There are other groups out there who are also similarly been on social media promoting hateful, destructive messaging, whether it's racism, bigotry, misogyny, homophobia, anti-trans messaging, and yet Facebook, and I would say Twitter too also, and other social media giants, have pretty much let these people have their way. There was a report which came out which said that Facebook, even though it makes claims of removing hateful materials from its platform, only gets to about 3 to 5%. And this was one of the things that was brought up in the testimony by Frances Haugen.
So you said just a moment ago that, governments now have no choice but to react. Why haven't they before? I mean, if this isn't really big news or surprising news, if the things that Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, was stating were kind of things that a lot of people felt they knew already to some degree, why haven't governments done anything thus far?
Well, I think in many instances it's a matter of political will. They didn't want to. They didn't have the political pressure. I also believe that the social media giants have immense resources dedicated to lobbying governments to make sure that legislation and regulations aren't put in place that affect their bottom line. We don't know what the backroom connections are between government leaders and the executives of these social media giants. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. But in Canada, I believe that the government, which has made a commitment to fighting hate, now needs to get their act together and address this issue in a meaningful way that prevents the sort of violence that we have seen that's been instigated through social media. The Quebec City mosque shooting in Canada is an example. The murder of the Afzal family in London was also brought on by online radicalization. And certainly the insurrection in Washington, D.C. in January was also instigated through social media. So these are platforms that have a lot of power to shape hearts and minds.
Australia, we're hearing today that the Australian government wants Facebook held liable for anonymous comments, be held liable for defamatory comments posted anonymously on the platform. I mean, what kinds of things that's one example of one government. What kinds of things do you want to see the Canadian government do, perhaps living up to that pledge, saying they'll do something within the first 100 days?
Well, we recommended that the government take action, with regard to all social media platforms, where there is some form of regulation that makes sure that the social media platforms are held legally liable for what is posted on their platforms, that they, to make sure that these social media platforms dedicate resources to remove inappropriate posting and messaging, and in addition, that the executives of these social media platforms be held criminally liable. Because it seems that the only way that executives of such companies seem to get around to doing the right thing is if they face the prospect not only of, multi-million or multi-billion-dollar fines, but also the prospect of going to court and face criminal charges.
Fareed, I just want to end by asking you, the work that you do as the founder of Canadians United Against Hate is personal for you. Can you tell me why this is so important to you personally?
My first experience with racism happened when I was 6 years old, and it was just a few months after we had arrived in Canada. My family had arrived in Canada, and I was beaten up by two older white boys who yelled racial slurs at me, and it put me in hospital and gave me several stitches to my face. Each of my younger brothers, have also faced similar racist violence, as have other members of my family. I have watched over the last 20 years, in particular in the aftermath of 9/11, where families' lives have been overturned and destroyed because of hate and bigotry. Certainly after the Quebec City mosque shooting, I think we had hoped that governments would take action to rein in hate and white supremacy, and we didn't see that. And we had another murder in June of a family just for being who they are. In addition, we've had targeting of black people from the black community, indigenous community, Jewish community, LGBTQ, who are all facing increasing incidents of hate, and a lot of it is propagated through social media. And social media creates the fuel that is poured on the embers of hate which is already there, and therefore it's now incumbent on our government to take the appropriate action and also lobby other Western democracies to do things similarly, because if we don't, what kind of country are we going to be living in if this is allowed to be perpetuated?
Fareed, I appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Fareed Khan is founder of Canadians United Against Hate, a group committed to combating hate, bigotry, racism, and xenophobia here in Canada.